The morning sun broke over the high peaks of the island. The people called Haiti, the land of high mountains. It was a world painted in 1,000 shades of green, from the deep emerald of the mountain forests to the bright, almost electric green of the parrot feathers that flashed through the canopy. Below, the Caribbean Sea was a canvas of impossible blues and turquoise, its gentle waves whispering against shores of powdery white sand. This was the home of the Taino. It was a world teeming with life, a paradise they had carefully cultivated and understood for centuries. Their days moved to the rhythm of the sun and the sea, a life woven into the very fabric of the islands they inhabited. They lived in villages called yucayekes, clusters of circular homes known as bohios. These dwellings, built from sturdy palm logs and thatched with palm leaves, were masterpieces of sustainable architecture, designed to withstand the fierce winds of the hurricane season. In the center of the village stood the Cacique, the larger rectangular home of the chief, the Cacique. Here the community gathered, decisions were made, and stories were told. The air was filled with the sounds of daily life, the rhythmic thump of women pounding cassava into flour, the laughter of children playing games, the low hum of men carving wood, weaving cotton into hammocks. The story of the Taino did not begin in the Caribbean. It began far to the south, in the heart of another continent. Archaeological evidence, linguistic ties, and ancient pottery styles all point to a single origin, the Orinoco River Delta, in what is now Venezuela. Here their ancestors, the Arawak-speaking Saladoid people, flourished. They were farmers, skilled potters, living along the fertile riverbanks. But something called them to the sea. Perhaps the search for new lands, the pressure of other groups, or an unquenchable spirit of exploration. They looked north, to the chain of islands that shimmered on the horizon, and they set out. This was not a single grand exodus, but a slow, determined migration over 1,000 years. It was a journey made in massive dugout canoes, some carved from a single silk cotton tree, carrying entire families, provisions, and sacred plants. They were brilliant navigators. They read the swell of the waves, the flight of birds, and the language of the stars. They island hopped northward, Trinidad, Tobago, Grenada, and onward across the Lesser Antilles. With each new island they adapted, they learned, and they grew. Saladoid pottery's white on red designs gave way to new styles. Their society grew more complex, their spiritual world more defined. Taino society was elegantly structured, a hierarchy built on respect and lineage. It was organized into chiefdoms known as cachicazgos, each ruled by a cacique. Not absolute power, but great responsibility. The cacique organized daily labor, led religious ceremonies, and settled disputes. Hereditary, passed down through the maternal line, showing the high status of women. Beneath the caciques, the Nitainos, nobles, warriors, advisors, and sub-chiefs. Most people were the Naborias, who farmed, fished, and built the villages. A universe of spirits, benevolent and malevolent. The two supreme deities, Yukahu, lord of cassava and the sea, Atabe, goddess of fresh water, fertility, and childbirth. Daily worship centered on the Cemis, not gods like Europeans thought, but physical objects housing spirits. A Cemi could be a natural object, a uniquely shaped stone, a piece of wood, or a crafted idol of stone, bone, wood, sometimes wrapped in cotton with shell inlay. Caciques held the most powerful Cemis. Consultation happened in the Cohoba ceremony, where the cacique and spiritual leaders inhaled a psychoactive powder ground from Cohoba seeds. In trance, they communicated with spirits, receiving prophecies, advice, and instructions that guided community decisions. Art and life were one. Creativity poured into daily and spiritual objects, paddles, duhos, semis, and pottery. They carved petroglyphs, figures, and symbols on river boulders and cave walls across the islands. This art was the visual language of their soul. On the morning of October 12, 1492, the familiar rhythms of the island of Guanahani were shattered. From the eastern horizon, 3 objects appeared, larger than any canoe the Taino had ever seen, with great white wings that caught the wind. It was the fleet of Christopher Columbus. The people gathered on the shore, a mixture of awe, curiosity, and apprehension. Columbus and his men waded ashore. In his journal, he would describe the people he met as handsome, gentle, and intelligent. He noted their generosity. They offered food, water, and parrots as gifts of friendship and diplomacy. The Spanish offered cheap glass beads, brass hawk's bells, red caps, trinkets that fascinated the Taino but held no real value. They carried swords and metal staffs that glinted in the sun. The Taino touched the blades, marveling at a weapon designed solely for killing other humans. A profound and tragic miscommunication lay at the heart of these first meetings. For Columbus, these gentle people were not a civilization to be understood, but a resource to be exploited. He claimed the island for Spain, planting a royal flag in the sand. He kidnapped several Taino to take back to Spain as proof of his discovery. As he sailed away, leaving a small garrison behind on Haiti, he left a poison that would soon seep into the very soul of the Caribbean. Their generosity was seen as weakness, their innocence as invitation for conquest. He believed he had reached the outskirts of Asia, and these people were Indians. The initial encounters were a study in mutual misunderstanding. The Taino operated on reciprocity and kinship. The Spanish came for gold, God, and glory. The promise of gold brought the Spanish back in force. Columbus returned on his second voyage with a fleet of 17, carrying over 1,000 men, soldiers, priests, colonists. Their mission was no longer exploration but occupation. They established La Isabela, the first permanent European colony in the Americas. The search for gold began in earnest, and the Taino were immediately pressed into service. A brutal system of tribute was imposed. Every Taino over the age of 14 was required to deliver a quota of gold dust every 3 months. This demand was impossible to meet. There were no vast gold mines in the Caribbean. The gold the Taino possessed was alluvial, panned in small quantities and valued for spiritual and decorative properties. Those who failed to meet the quota faced horrific punishment. Their hands were cut off and they were left to bleed to death, a gruesome warning. The Spanish quest for wealth turned Taino paradise into a living hell. The nightmare did not end with the search for gold. As the Taino population collapsed, the Spanish implemented the encomienda system, slavery in all but name. Large grants of land and the people on them were assigned to encomenderos. Supposedly in exchange for conversion and protection, colonists could demand tribute and forced labor. Men were sent to mines, women to the fields, families were torn apart. Alongside the sword came the cross and with it diseases, smallpox, measles, influenza, against which the Taino had no immunity. Entire villages were wiped out in a matter of weeks. The population of Haiti, possibly 1 million or more in 1492, plummeted. By 1514, a Spanish census recorded only 22,000 Taino. Within a single generation, a vibrant civilization was brought to the brink of annihilation. Their world was not just conquered, it was being erased. This systematic cruelty was the beginning of a genocide. In the face of such overwhelming brutality, many Taino despaired, but others chose to fight. Anacaona, Cacique of Zaragua, leader of the largest and most prosperous chiefdom on Haiti. Renowned for her beauty, intelligence, and artistic talent, she composed ballads and poems famous across the island. Initially, she counseled peace, believing coexistence possible. Her brother Bohiccio had welcomed them. After his death and years of Spanish cruelty and broken promises, her policy became cautious resistance. Governor Nicolas de Ovando saw her not as noble, but as a threat. In 1503, under the pretense of a friendly meeting, Ovando marched on Zaragua with 300 heavily armed soldiers. Anacaona prepared a great feast, gathering 80 subordinate chiefs and leaders to pay tribute. Soldiers surrounded the building, set it ablaze, and slaughtered the chiefs trapped inside. Outside, the people gathered for festivities were cut down. Anacaona was captured, taken to Santo Domingo, put on trial for conspiracy, a ludicrous charge against the sovereign. Offered clemency to become a Spaniard's concubine, she refused, choosing death over dishonor. For her defiance, Anacaona, the golden flower, was publicly hanged. Her death marked the end of organized Taino resistance on Haiti, but her story survived as a symbol of courage in the face of betrayal and tyranny. As the Spanish consolidated control over Haiti, some Taino chose flight over subjugation. One was Hatuey, a cacique who had witnessed massacres and slavery firsthand. Gathering about 400 followers in canoes, he fled Haiti and crossed to eastern Cuba. He had a mission: to warn the Taino of Cuba about the coming storm. He traveled from village to village, sharing the terrifying truth.
He famously showed a basket of gold and declared, "Here is the God of the Spaniards. For this they have come here. For this they persecute us. For this they have killed our parents and our brothers. For this they have subjugated and killed all our people."
He organized a guerrilla war, launching hit-and-run attacks that harassed and slowed the Spanish advance. But the Spanish had superior weapons, armor, and war dogs. Eventually, through betrayal, Hatuey was captured. Velázquez condemned him to be burned at the stake. A Franciscan friar urged him to accept baptism so his soul might go to heaven.
Hatuey asked if Spaniards also went to heaven. Told the good did, he answered, "I prefer to go to hell, so that I may not be where they are." With those words, he was consumed by the flames.
His story became a legend, a defiant cry for freedom that would echo through the centuries. His sacrifice was not in vain. It kept hope alive. The voices of resistance, Anacaona, Hatuey, are threads in the long tapestry of anti-colonial struggle in the Americas. The official Spanish narrative written for centuries was that the Taino were extinct. By the mid-16th century, war, slavery, and disease had so catastrophically reduced their numbers that the chiefdoms had ceased to exist. The remaining survivors were absorbed into the colonial fabric, forced to intermarry with Spanish colonists and enslaved Africans. It seemed as though a whole people had vanished, leaving behind place names, artifacts, and a ghost of memory. But a people are more than a political structure. They are blood, culture, and knowledge. The Taino did not simply vanish, they went underground. In remote mountain regions, small groups preserved their ways in isolation. Taino women, taken as wives or concubines by Spanish men, passed their knowledge and genes to their mestizo children. They taught the healing properties of local plants, how to farm using conuco mounds, and how to prepare cassava bread. Groundbreaking genetic studies have confirmed that a significant percentage of people in Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Cuba carry Taino mitochondrial DNA. This is the scientific proof of the story of survival, the genetic echo of those Taino grandmothers who endured the conquest. The words we use every day, hurricane, huracan, barbecue, barbacoa, hammock, hamaca, canoe, canoa, tobacco, tobacco, are filled with Taino echoes. The foods, farming techniques, and folklore of the Caribbean are deeply infused with Taino elements. Their spirit endured, not pristine, but foundational to creolized identity. A people may be battered and broken, but their roots run deep. From those roots, new life continues to spring forth. Today, across the Caribbean and its diaspora, a powerful cultural rebirth is taking place. The children of the Taino are reclaiming their identity. They're studying the archaeological record, reviving ancient ceremonies, practicing traditional crafts, and demanding that the true story be told. This revival is a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Organizations and cultural centers in Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and Cuba are not reenactors. They see themselves as the living continuation of a people who were never truly lost. They are piecing together fragments to build a meaningful future. The Taino legacy is in the rhythm of the music, the flavors of the food, the deep spiritual connection to land and sea. It is a reminder that the history of the Caribbean did not begin with Columbus. It is deep, ancient, a story of ingenuity, art, and a profound understanding of the natural world. Recognizing this legacy is essential to understanding the full identity of the Caribbean people, forged from the contributions and struggles of Taino peoples, African peoples, and Europeans. The story of the Taino is one of profound loss, but also of survival, adaptation, and rebirth. The voices that were silenced 5 centuries ago are beginning to speak again through their descendants and enduring cultural elements. They speak through the blood that flows in the veins of millions. The Taino spirit, like the sacred ceiba tree, was battered and broken, but its roots ran deep. From those roots, new life continues to spring forth, vibrant and defiant. Their story is not only tragedy, it is a living legacy. Remember to seek the full story behind the names, the foods, the words, the people. The Taino are part of us.